This is Holland, and these are just a few of the hundreds of canoeists who were brought together from all over the world to go head-to-head to see just who is the best over the long-distance course. On the weekend of the 3rd and 4th of September, the 4th World Marathon Canoe Championships were held in excellent conditions in Bosbaan in Amsterdam, one of the prime canoeing facilities in Europe. The 42-kilometer course over waterways not always connected along its distance, which means 3 compulsory portages. To confirm the fact that the marathon is an established element of canoeing as an international sport, 28 countries have entered the 1994 championships. For South Africa, it was the second time around. The South African team consisted of 2 K1 paddlers, Robbie Herreveld and Dani Malherbe, 2 K2 boats powered by Lo Malherbe and Eugene van der Westhuizen, and Graham Bird and Neil Evans, and 2 women in the K1 section, Ansi Mankroni and Dean Simpson. 4 juniors were also included in the team, but inexperience and bad luck kept them out of the medal standings. In the K1 event, all South African eyes were on Robbie Herreveld and Dani Malherbe. Herreveld participated in the last World Championships in 1992 in Australia in the K2 section, where he and his partner Neil Evans took 4th place. And there they go for the start of 42 long and hard kilometers. 47 of the world's best marathon paddlers trying to make everything of the start. For many paddlers, the first 200 meters is the most important part of the race, as it establishes the patterns for the rest of the contest. Falling behind here means that it'll become more and more difficult as the race progresses to cross over to the leading group. But once the initial jockeying for positions is over, the hectic pace settles down and energy is conserved for the 42 grueling kilometers that lie ahead. The leaders hit the first portage area, where the canoes will have to be carried over a strip of land between 2 areas of water. And first out of the water, Lars Koch of Denmark, Tommy Krantz of Sweden, and South Africa's top long-distance paddler, Robbie Herreveld. The portage areas allow the strong runners amongst the canoeists to break away from the rest of the field, and it is here that the first big gaps form in the pack. The canoes weigh between 6 to 8 kilograms, not a heavy weight to carry, but their bulk and length make them awkward to run with effectively, and many paddlers allow one end to drag. Back into the water once again, and it's Robbie Herreveld who has caught up some time and gone into the lead ahead of Tommy Krantz. The South African, with the experience of the long and difficult rocky portages in this country's races, helping him enormously. Air and road traffic over ahead, and a lot of traffic coming up underneath as well, as the leading bunch come up to the 10-kilometer mark. 9 of the best long-distance men in the world now making up the leading group, and each one of them keeping a very close eye on their rivals. The 9 boats fitting very neatly into the classic diamond pattern that canoeists strive for in order to slipstream off the leading boat to make things easier and conserve energy for the final dash to the line. Some paddlers keep their supply of fluids and nutrition for the race with them from start to finish, while others rely on their seconds, which is not always the best way, as Tommy Krantz heads back into the race, having lost precious seconds on the leaders, and more importantly, a whole container of vital drinking fluid. A change of lead, as like cyclists, one makes way for another to do the hard work and set the pace for a while. This is Holland, and so the design of the course in Amsterdam allows spectators to follow the progress of most of the race on bicycles. A huge crowd staying with the leaders almost from start to finish. Onto the halfway mark, and the leading group now whittled down to 6. Robbie Herreveld still setting the pace most of the time. The other South African paddler in this section, Dani Malherbe, fell ill and also picked up problems with his boat, which meant that Herreveld was now South Africa's only hope for a medal. Under the bridge and into the second portage area, Herrefeldt still leading at this stage, with only Krantz and Koch able to stay with him at the moment. The rest of the leaders having been shaken by a surprise spurt. Sweden's Tommy Krantz pulls into the side very early, while Herrefeldt and Koch go as far as possible on the water. Krantz's surprise move paying off as he drags his canoe across the portage very quickly and makes it back to the water on the other side ahead of the other two. Only a few seconds gained, but at this level of competition, every second can be vital, and it now becomes progressively more difficult for the other two to catch up again, which means expending ill-afforded energy. At this point in the race, the course winds its way through a series of narrow canals in the Bosbaan Reserve, and it becomes very difficult for spectators to follow the leaders, who now have a lead of over a minute on the following group, enough to ensure that, barring any disaster, the race comes down to just these three men. Herrefeldt wisely takes the time to drink some more liquid, each paddler experiencing the loss of huge quantities of fluids through the expenditure of so much energy in this race. He's still leading and setting a strong pace at the moment, but knowing that Lars Koch of Denmark is a sprint specialist and liable to be very dangerous in the final sprint to the line. 5 kilometers and one more portage area to go at this stage of the race as the leaders come out of the narrow, bushy channel and into the open waters once again. At this point, the race comes down to tactics, each man concentrating on keeping to his rhythm and maintaining an easy, steady rate of paddling, while at the same time keeping an eye on the others to see what they are doing. With just a few kilometers to go, a sudden break could prove to be a winner, and each of the three ready to follow instantly if that should happen. The excited and very vocal crowd back once again at the third portage area, and this time it's Lars Koch who takes a page from Krantz's book, coming out of the water very early and letting his legs do all the work. This is the vital break, and it's taken both Krantz and Herrefeldt by surprise. The South African starting to tire now and unable to respond as quickly as he should. Just 200 meters left to go, and now it's all or nothing. Koch leading a charging Krantz under the final bridge, with Herrefeldt doing all he can to get his tired arms turning to try and get back on the pace. Astonishingly, the South African manages to come back once more, despite developing some severe wrist cramps that make each stroke agony. But he doesn't give up until the very end, although the final sprint of Lars Koch just too much for the other two. Krantz just pipping Herrefeldt at the post for second place, the South African eventually taking the bronze medal position. But that's the highest placing a South African canoeist has reached in a world championship, and all honors to Robbie Herrefeldt. So the gold medal to a proud and very happy Lars Koch of Denmark, with Sweden's Tommy Krantz just as happy to pick up the silver medal. But for the South Africans, it was a mixture of delight and disappointment, as team manager Greyling Viljoen explains.
Ons het hoë verwagtinge gehad. Ek het regtig gedink ons gaan meer medaljes kry. Algeheel is ek redelik tevrede, maar die teëspoed het ons regtig bietjie gery. Twee van die canoes wat ons ingeskryf gehad het was fictief, het gebreek langs die pad, en dit is een van die mees frustrerende dinge wat met enige canoevaarder kan gebeur, as ons daar fout gaan met jou toerusting. Verder is nog 2 inskrywings, het siek geword en die ouens was regtig siek geweest. Hulle moes onttrek het, so dit was 4 klaar uit die wetvaart uit geweest en nie een van hulle het klaargemaak nie.
In K2 section of the championship, South Africans Graham Bird and Neil Evans were paired together and stayed up with the leaders until the halfway point, when the pace proved to be just too strong and they fell back, finally ending up in a very creditable 7th place overall. very strong field this year in this class, and the pace very strong indeed. Too strong for the South Africans, who experienced a lot of bad luck throughout the championships. Eugene van der Westhuizen and Lo Malherbe forced to retire from the competition with a snapped rudder. And there's nothing more disappointing and lonely than having to stow the boat away on top of the van while the rest of the pack are paddling way into the distance. So, 7th the best position in the K2 class for South Africa, while in the women's K1 section, the South Africans also took a 7th place for Ansi Mankruni, while Dean Simpson finished a very creditable 13th overall. So, a mixture of good and bad luck for South Africa this year. Robbie Herrefeld's 3rd place on the podium and a bronze medal showing, however, that the green and gold still a force to be reckoned with in marathon canoeing, despite the long years of isolation from international competition.